screen.
It's not bad.
Oh, yeah. Because they're
Okay. Is that the download?
If you need something, so I'll just.
I can see myself.
And if you need.
Oh, I see you have this like a docking station type of thing.
So this is all just.
Okay, cool.
Oh,
Sound is won't go over there. If you do it
Oh, you're kidding. He sits right there. Well, I'm gonna get text him.
So if they go virtual next Monday and Tuesday, you think it'll be virtual the rest of the semester? Or just for that week?
Oh, thank you.
Who knows?
It's so hot. The only cancellations I don't believe.
Yeah, no cases in Michigan are rising. I think the first tomorrow actually.
It's like, like one case all
I
year.
was kind of wondering if you would want to, or they could say,
Oh, yeah.
you guys have to stay virtual. So normal head time.
So 214. Your class.
Good.
Teaching us quarantine. This has it really bad.
What?
Oh, yeah. I'm pretty sure Emma has it. Andy has it. Everybody probably has it.
I feel like we're similar because it'll be basically yeah. That's why I know what's happening. I was sitting here going, I'm like, why?
She said that her mom got an email that she was like exposed, but she didn't get it.
Right, they're not quarantining people.
But why would you tell her and just email her?
I should have parents like, are you vaccinated? And I should have said no. I should have said, I could have gone home. Oh, you are vaccinated? Yeah.
Oh,
Like, I
gotcha.
should have just been like, no. Yeah, and he would have been like, okay, go.
From who?
I don't know, but Perry was just like vaccinated. I was like, well, I mean, I feel like, yeah. But I guess you don't want to see each other. So I was like,
Wait,
I feel like
yeah.
I don't know, it's just like she must have eaten butter and was like, are you too vaccinated? And I was like, yeah. Yes. Yes. Unfortunately. I could be home right now.
You better go on my.
I could be home right now. See, it's like, being at home and
I could be
home.
home.
Not do anything else.
Is that one? Yeah, I know. I know.
The hybrid stuff's stupid. Because if I'm on mine by myself, I just get
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like, or if like, okay, has a good attention to, there's like.
No, you're so right.
Are you recording these?
What's that? Sure.
So are they Zooming right now?
So we should be on YouTube.
Yes, like I said, I could go watch these.
Yeah, when you go home, you should be able to watch this on Father Tony's YouTube account. He said.
Father Tony's YouTube account. I'm on.
So we're missing 2 people plus Emma. Who are we
We're
missing?
missing Destiny and I think that.
Oh, they go back quarantine, huh? So do you have their contact info? If you text them, you could just say, like Father Tony's YouTube account, and they can watch class right now. If you just Google it. Yeah, it's live right now. So if you go to YouTube and just search for Tony, his last name is S-N-E-L-A-N. If you search for that, it should pop right up. I found it yesterday when I was looking.
Hey, Titi. If you want to watch my girl, If you wanna watch Econ, it's on Father Tony's YouTube channel. It's live streaming. Search Tony Sneela on YouTube.
Are you supposed to last?
We basically
I know, is it smelly? Yeah.
Oh, I'm praying for you guys. But, all right, find us on YouTube. We're live. We're famous. Okay, let me. Bye. She also does not sound good. Just not a bunch of them that are already shooting. There's something that Emma somebody's got this that.
So did you guys, find it?
Yes, it's built in.
Why can I not try it? That's so fun.
And I know, we all put in our earbuds, we all watch it.
There you go. That'd be the real 21st century way to do it.
Yeah.
Your ones to watch that TV with family live.
Right.
So are you guys vaccinated or not? How's that work for?
If we're vaccinated, we don't get quarantined. Like, so like Vincent has it, but the 3-year-old, like, I think we're all vaccinated, so we're not.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember if it's
I don't know who he is. I think Amos can get us sick, you know what I mean?
We certainly got it.
His
Brother
brother
had
has
it,
it.
said he feels really sick, so I'm sick.
Great sign.
Well, yeah, that's great, because I stayed right in front of them, so.
And you don't wear a mask.
Right,
Are you
I don't.
vaccinated?
Yeah, vaccinated.
Well, I think you're probably good.
Yeah, might be okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Vaccine. Well, even if you have it, you probably won't get it.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
It just gives you a lower chance of
Right.
dying.
Okay,
It's
like,
not 100%, I feel like,
yeah, I was reading the statistics yesterday, and it's like unvaccinated people, like, there's so much younger, they're like 98% of the hospitalizations right now.
Yeah, I get the booster tomorrow, so hope I can hang out. Hang
Yeah,
out till
what's
tomorrow.
the point of the booster? Like, I have to get that second boost.
It's like the flu, you know, you get your flu shot every year, it's just
Yeah.
like the same thing.
Yeah, I guess the efficacy of the vaccine kind of wanes, so the booster kind of shoots back up.
Yeah.
So I got my second shot in April, so it starts at like 95, then kind of tapers down. I think Moderna, which I have, I think tapers down to about 70% after 6 months, and then the booster's supposed to kick it back up.
No, I read the other day, I got Pfizer in April, and it's like supposed to go down like 40% effectiveness after 6 months.
So,
Yeah, I think
so my
Pfizer,
boosters.
So I gotta get that booster.
yeah, I think Pfizer doesn't do as well as Moderna. did.
Well, and the other thing is like if you've already had COVID, right, but like it's gonna be again.
But
For a
Grace,
certain amount of time.
Grace just got it again.
Yeah.
Grace did it. This is her second time, I don't know. This might be
Wait, she just got it again? She was the first one of us to get it.
And
Yeah.
she was, wait, they're doing something at her school where like they have kids getting tested every day at school.
Instead of going online.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like
if they test positive, they can go out, if they keep testing negative.
they can come to school, which makes sense. Like Natalie.
How do they get those results that fast?
It takes 15 minutes and then the rapid test.
Oh.
Which so they also isn't very accurate.
I was just saying, that's not that accurate.
So they come.
So basically, that's what this
before
is.
school?
Yeah.
Wow.
So they can come all the way up here, then test positive and go all the way back.
Okay, we should start going.
Okay.
Because that's enough.
So last time we were talking about oligopoly. Oligopoly is when you have a handful of sellers basically selling the same thing. The example we talked about was duopoly, when we had 2 sellers selling the same thing. It was gallons of water. We said what the oligopolist should do is collude. Jointly produce the monopoly quantity, charge the monopoly price, and then split the monopoly profits. But we said the problem with that is, if one person colludes while the other person has incentive to cheat, produce a little bit more, that drives down the price a little bit, but it bumps up that person's profit at the expense of the other person. So we said, well, hey, if Jill is colluding, Jack should cheat, produce a little bit more, bump up his profits at the expense of Jill. Jill knows that, so she knows that Jack will cheat, so she should cheat too. As a result, both of them cheat. Both of them earn lower profits than if both of them colluded. So colluding is optimal from the standpoint of the oligopolist because if one person colludes, the other person immediately has incentive to cheat. So we can,
Carol, you go first, man, I'm kind of.
Yeah,
I can unplug it.
I know that. She goes, nothing, to see the, hang out to see the board. Where she,
I'm gonna move it over.
Thank you.
So do you not see the board with that picture?
No, you have to away.
I mean,
Yeah.
but she has the lecture.
Yeah, she has the notes, and I emailed her yesterday saying I would take a picture of anything I write to the board and post it on campus, so. She can hear what I'm saying, and then hopefully the notes, you can follow along even if you can't see the board. So, we can use something called game theory to study oligopoly. Game theory just says how many people behave in strategic situations. A strategic situation says, my choice depends on what I think you're going to do. So if we think about Jack and Jill, Jill will cheat because she thinks Jack will cheat too because she knows it's in his best interest to cheat, because if she doesn't cheat, he can bump up his profits by cheating. So, what's that?
When you say Jack and Jill, I was doing up and
Yeah. So if we think about, scroll back up, the most famous game theory problem is probably the prisoner's dilemma. We could use the prisoner's dilemma to talk about oligopoly. So prisoner's dilemma says, if you ever watch a cop show, or perhaps one of you has been arrested for all I know, you know what happens is that, well, let's suppose there are two people who are arrested by the implied, write whatever names you want to write in for the person you are actually arrested with. So two people get arrested and charged with a crime, and if you watch a cop show, you know that each person is put into a separate interrogation room to try to extract a confession. So, okay, Bonnie, in this case, is in her own interrogation room, and the cop says to Bonnie, hey, look, your partner Clyde is confessing right now. He's still his guts. He's signing a confession right now. Is Clyde really confessing? Probably not. But that's what the cop says. So the cop says, well, okay, since he's confessing, if you confess too, hey, we're going to give you a deal. You're going to spare us the time and trouble of a trial. We'll cut you a break. We'll give you 5 years in prison. However, if you demand to go to trial, he's confessing, he's going to testify against you, you're going to get convicted and get 20 years. While the guy who is confessing goes free. So that's what the cop tells Bobby, hey, if you confess, we'll give you 5 years. If you go to trial, hey, we're going to give you 20. So kind of think about this from your standpoint, right? Suppose you get arrested and you're really innocent. What if the cop says, hey, if you go to trial, we're going to give you, say, 25 years, 20 years, something like that. However, we'll cut you a deal. We'll give you 5 years. You guys are probably 18 right now, so you get out and you're 23, get whole life in front of you. But if you demand to go to trial, we'll probably convict you because 90% of most people get convicted. You'll serve the full 20. We'll make sure of that, so you will be up until you're near 50. Innocent, or go to trial and take a chance you can sway the jury to not convict.
There's nothing, I don't know, I feel like they have to have some knowledge of how much evidence they have, right? Like going into that, you have to kind of know how much they know.
They can bluff you though. That's how we got all this, you got fingerprint evidence, you got an eyewitness who said, yeah, that was her.
But if you're innocent, I guess that's if you're guilty, but then you're like, oh, they do have that.
Sure, I didn't do it.
Like if I wasn't even like there. Then I
But don't you think the jury is biased to believe that you're guilty because you wouldn't have been arrested if you weren't guilty?
a little bit, but.
No, you could be arrested just because, like, you have motive.
Yeah. Yeah, sure, right, if the wrong person shows up dead and it turns out you didn't have a motive even though you weren't there. Pieces together where you can see how
It's
it's
not
great.
an alibi.
Yeah, if you don't have an alibi, right, the cop can say, well, there's some evidence, you've got an eyewitness says it's you weren't there, but the eyewitness says you were. You know, we got some DNA evidence, but maybe you weren't there, maybe it was planned, but hey, there's still some evidence.
So I don't think
I would take 5 years too, probably. You know, that's why you make the argument that prison's full of a bunch of innocent people who just take the deal, you know, rather than rolling the dice in front of the jury.
Well, what crimes?
If it was like
murder?
I'd take the 5
If
years.
it's sad though, like people kill each other in prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true
Why not
too.
make it?
Or though you could be like a kingpin in prison too.
Not if you're a newbie though.
Oh, you gotta like work your way up the system just like anything.
Yeah, like start selling like the stuff that everybody wants, like have someone on the outside do the marketing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to an Econ Talk podcast. If you guys like podcasts, check out Econ Talk. You gotta go back 4 or 5 years for this podcast. It was like the economics of prison. And I guess for some prison systems, the kingdom was making the equivalent of like $1 million per year. And just selling stuff in prison. So there's that possibility.
How do guards like not know?
Right? If the guards in, they're making $18 an hour. So you guys gotta know this stuff in case you ever serve time. At any rate, this is all being recorded. I probably shouldn't talk about it. So, okay, that's what Bonnie's being told. Hey, take the deal. You get 5, go to trial, we're gonna give you 20. Well, Clyde's in a separate room too, and the cop talking to Clyde says the same thing. Hey, Bonnie's confessing right now. Is she confessing right now? No, this is a bluff, but Clyde doesn't know that. So, cop tells Clyde, hey, if you confess too, we'll give you the same deal, 5 years in prison. Go to trial, we're gonna give you 20. But she's going to cooperate. If you go to trial, she'll walk scot-free. So this is classic cop show stuff, right? What the cops don't say is that perhaps their evidence is pretty thin, like we've been talking about. The other suspect isn't necessarily confessing. If each suspect just keeps his or her mouth shut, he or she will be charged with a lesser crime and only get 1 year in prison. However, right, these 2 suspects are in separate interrogation rooms. So one suspect can't see what the other is doing. Okay, that's the stuff for the first year's dilemma. So this will allow us to write down what's called the payoff matrix. The payoff matrix says, hey, what does each player or prisoner get given what the other person does? So okay, we'll write the payoff matrix this way, it'll be in parentheses. So the first number will be what, I guess I have it this way, Clyde. So Kate is called Clyde, C-L-Y-D-E, and the second number will be what Bonnie gets. So the way to think about the payoff matrix is that Clyde is, I'll have player 1, and then Bonnie is player 2. So we can just call this guy, he's player 1, and this guy is player 2. I'm not going to take a picture of this, that's not super important. So if you get this setup, we know that, well, hey, if both confess, so hey, old Clyde gets 5, so does Bonnie. However, if they both remain silent, each gets a year. Clyde gets a year, Bonnie gets a year. If Clyde keeps his mouth shut, but Bonnie confesses, well, hey, Clyde's got a problem, he's getting 20, well, Bonnie is going scot-free. If Clyde confesses while Bonnie remains silent, well, she's got the problem. She gets 20, while Clyde, well, he goes scot-free.
Why would he go free?
Because he's a collaborator now, right? That's the deal. He testifies at trial, he goes to witness protection or something.
It's like,
Like witness protection, right? Yeah, if you ever, you get an informant or something. Yeah, if you ever watch the movie Goodfellas, it's like a classic mobster movie. That's what happens in Goodfellas. Like, there's a guy, his name is Henry in Goodfellas. In real life, his name was, I don't know, he's played by Ray Liotta in Goodfellas. He killed a bunch of people, and he testified against the mob boss and got out scot-free, so that's what happened. Sandy the Bullet Bravanos, the same idea. He was the number 2 under John Gotti. Testifies against John Gotti in the early 90s. That he gets all scot-free. He killed a lot of people, like 40, 50 people, something like that, I think. So sure, you testify against the other person, you can walk even if you've done some pretty heinous stuff. So there you go, right? So we've talked about this, right? Oh, we haven't talked about this yet, I'm sorry. So let's think about what each player's strategy is. So let's start with Clyde. What should Clyde do? Well, again, this is a strategic situation, so what Clyde does is based on what he does. So suppose Clyde thinks Bonnie's going to confess. He's got 2 choices, to confess as well or remain silent. So what should he do? Well, if he confesses as well, he gets 5 years, right? If he remains silent, he gets 20. Well, 5 beats 20, so if Bonnie confesses Clyde, he should confess too, right? However, suppose Clyde thinks Bonnie is going to remain silent. If he thinks she's like a real honorable person, keeping her mouth shut, what should he do? Well, if he remains silent, he gets a year. If he confesses, he walks scot-free. Well, hey, walking scot-free beats a year, so he confesses that she remains silent.
But he's gonna confess anyway.
Yeah, he confesses anyway. So we will say, I'm kind of doing this in reverse of the notes, it's not a big deal. But confessing is what's called a dominant strategy for Clyde. Dominant strategy says it's a strategy you do regardless of what the other person does. And as we'll see, confessing is a dominant strategy for Bonnie as well. So we are Bonnie. She thinks if she confesses 2, she gets 5. If she remains silent, she gets 20. Well, 5 beats 20, so she confesses. Okay, we are still Bonnie. She thinks Clyde is remaining silent. She knows he's not talking. What should she do? If she remains silent too, she gets a year. If she confesses, she goes scot-free. So what should she do? Well, she should confess and go scot-free. So for Bonnie, confessing is the dominant strategy as well. No matter what Clyde does, she should confess. So I have to scroll up now, so I'll make sure that this outputs just can't just for the 3 people here. Put my phone somewhere.
So if we go online, are you the Zoom?
Yeah, just Zoom. I'll post the link on Canvas, I guess.
Okay.
So you just go to Canvas, open up the Zoom link.
Which would only have to do that for like 1 class.
Yeah, hopefully. I asked Father Toby if it would be just for Thanksgiving or for the rest of the semester. He said he didn't know, but hopefully just Thanksgiving if that's what happens. But nothing's set in stone, right? So we can still be here in person next week, Monday.
We can find out.
So, okay, so we've established that confessing is the dominant strategy for both players. So what that means is the Nash equilibrium, we talked about Nash equilibrium at the very last part of the last class. Nash equilibrium says, hey, what's the outcome that emerges with each person acting in his or her own best interest? So that is, what is the outcome that emerges in this strategic situation where each player plays his or her dominant strategy? So the Nash equilibrium is, well, hey, they both confess, and they both get 5 years in prison. Well, from the standpoint of Bonnie and Clyde, hey, that's suboptimal, right? They would be better off, if we scroll back down, they would be better off if they both just kept their mouth shut. If they both kept their mouth shut, they would each get a year, right? That beats each getting 5. So the Nash equilibrium, from the standpoint of the players, is not the optimal equilibrium. They can be better. The problem is, right, how does both people remain silent? Because if one person remains silent, the other person automatically has incentive to confess in order to go scot-free. So if I'm Clyde, I know that, hey, both Bonnie and I are better off if we keep our mouth shut. But if she keeps her mouth shut, I should blab so I can go scot-free. And then on top of it, I, Clyde, know that Bonnie's facing the same incentive, right? That if I keep my mouth shut, she automatically has incentive to blab. Hence, I should blab, she blabs too. We end up both confessing, even though you're being hauled off in handcuffs to serve her 5-year sentence, we would have both been better off if we would have just kept our mouth shut.
But you don't know that the cops really could have. Right?
Yeah, although in this setup, we're just kind of assuming that if we both kept our mouth shut, the evidence will only get you a year.
This is interesting. That's cool. I don't know.
So that's the $1 million question right here, right? How can you ensure the other player remains silent when, if you remain silent, you know the other player automatically has incentive to confess? How do you ensure if you're Clyde, you make sure that Bonnie keeps her mouth shut? Doesn't immediately blab and walk scot-free? So we will come to that question in a second, but that's the setup of the prisoner's dilemma. So we can use the prisoner's dilemma to talk about our friends Jack and Jill from the last class. So remember Jack and Jill, just as a refresher from the last class. So if they both collude, right, Jack gets 1,800, Jill gets 1,800, and if they both cheat, we said Jack gets 600 or 1,600, and then Jill gets 1,600. So we could fill in the payoff matrix for Jack and Jill. So we'll say Jack is player 1, and Jill is player 2. Doesn't matter. It's okay if they both cheat. We've established that. I'll show maybe these tables a little bit bigger. 1,600 for Jack, 1,600 for Jill. If they both collude, 1,800 for Jack, 1,800 for Jill. However, if Jack colludes and Jill cheats, it's what? 1,500 for Jack, 2,000 for Jill. That's what we said last time. And then if Jill colludes and then Jack cheats, it is 2,000 for Jack, 1,500 for Jill. So we could use the exact same logic we used for the prisoner's dilemma to figure out what the Nash equilibrium. For this case, is even though we know what the Nash equilibrium is, the Nash equilibrium is fine. They're both going to cheat. That's what we established last time. We can see that, just use the payoff matrix and thinking about this in the context of the prisoner's dilemma. Because let's suppose that we are Jack. So if we're Jack, what we do really depends on what we think Jill's going to do. It's okay, suppose we are Jack, and we think Jill's going to cheat. What should we do? Well, if we cheat too, we get 1,600. If we collude, we get 1,500. Well, 16 beats 15, so if I think Jill's going to cheat, I should cheat too. You know, just like at a high school dance, right? If you think your duopolist is cheating, what should you do? Well, you should cheat too. Just common sense. So suppose you are Jack and you think Jill's going to collude. What should you do? Well, if you collude too, you get 1,800. If you cheat, you get 2,000. So if Jill colludes, well, you should cheat. So for Jack, I think I have this in the notes somewhere, maybe I don't. We could say, for Jack, cheating is the dominant strategy. No matter what Jill does, Jack should cheat. Now let's suppose that, hey, we're Jill. We gotta figure out what we should do. Suppose we think Jack's gonna cheat. Our choice is cheat versus collude. If we cheat too, then we get 1,600. If we collude, we only get 1,500. Well, 16 beats 15, so hey, we're gonna cheat. If we're Jill, and we think Jack's gonna collude, our choice is collude too. Get 1,800 versus cheat, get 2,000. Well, hey, 2,000 beats 1,800, so no matter what Jack does, Jill should cheat. So not only is cheating the dominant strategy for Jack, cheating is the dominant strategy for Jill too. So the Nash equilibrium is, well, hey, they both cheat. So they both end up in divorce court, right? Because they both cheated. That's suboptimal, right? Because when they're both in divorce court, they're like, well, hey, you know what? We both would have been better off had we not cheated. It got 1,800 each. The problem is, how does Jack and Jill get down here to the optimal equilibrium? So we might call this the optimal equilibrium. Just call it EQ for short. Whereas this box up here, the two green lines, we will call this the Nash equilibrium. So the Nash equilibrium is the one that emerges when each player does his or her dominant strategy. The optimal equilibrium is, well, hey, what's the best outcome for each player? Because the Nash equilibrium is not the best outcome for these two players. The best outcome would be, well, hey, they both collude. They both price fix with each other. The problem is, if, say, Jill price fixes, that's what collusion means, Jack has incentive to cheat on her bubble profits. Jill knows that, so she cheats too, hence they end up right here. So kind of like the prisoner's dilemma, suppose, say, Jack wants to collude. How does he ensure that if he colludes, she doesn't immediately cheat on him to bump up his profits? How can he ensure that she cheats too? So that's where this idea comes in. So you can delete the word commitment as a typo. So in order to ensure that, well, hey, if I collude, you collude too, and immediately don't cheat on me, or in the context of the prisoner's dilemma, in order to ensure that if I keep my mouth shut, you keep your mouth shut too, I need what's called a credible threat. So that's what the term should be, credible threat. A credible threat says, well, hey, if I collude, if I keep my mouth shut, you're going to keep your mouth shut too. You're going to collude too, because all of a sudden, keeping your mouth shut or colluding becomes your dominant strategy. In other words, the credible threat says, well, thanks to this threat, the cost of cheating on me if I collude, or the cost of confessing on me if I keep my mouth shut, all of a sudden outweighs the benefit of cheating or confessing on me. Let me snap a quick picture of this before I move up. So a credible threat is just like what the name implies, right? You're going to threaten the other person and say, well, hey, if you backstab me by confessing or undercutting me on price and quantity, something so bad is going to happen to you that that's going to outweigh whatever boost in profit or reduction in sentence you get. So the threat has to be credible, right? The other person has to believe you will actually do that if the other person cheats on you. So the opposite of a credible threat would be like a non-credible threat. Sometimes it's called cheap talk, right? If you just issue a threat that no one believes, okay, the person's just going to stand right in the back and confess or undercut you on price and quantity because they know that you're not going to do anything to them. So think about the prisoner's dilemma. You know, confess versus remaining silent. If you like mob movies, the mob hasn't been a thing for probably about 30 years or so. But a couple of movies I like. Goodfellas, we talked about that earlier. I also like the movie Casino. That was another mafia movie. You guys ever watched The Sopranos? It's been off TV for probably 15 years or so now. But I guess it's like with the pandemic, that's like a show that the younger generation has discovered. That's all about kind of a suburban father who turns out to be a mob boss. Well, if you know anything about the mob, they have something called the omerta. So the mob is just to be a full-fledged member of what's called a made guy. So if you watch a good about being a made guy, in The Sopranos, a couple of guys in The Sopranos become made guys. That means you become a full-fledged member of the mafia. But when you become a made guy, you also take a vow called the omerta. So what that says is, well, hey, if you're ever arrested for something as a mafia member, if you decide to flip and turn state's evidence, maybe confess on the fellow mafia members, the mafia Yep. That's what Alberta means, right? You confess, you're dead. And they'll get you in prison because they're boss game members in prison. It's okay. Suppose the Omerta is credible, which at one time I think it was, right? If you float down the mafia, you're done. It's okay. What's the payoff for confessing now? Well, it's negative infinity. You're dead if you confess, right? What do you get if you're dead? Negative infinity. Whatever the value is for big dead, we'll just say it's infinitely negative. It's really, really bad. And you're going to die in a real person way too, to make an example of you. So think about how this credible threat changes the payoff matrix. Because if both confess, well, they're both dead, both get negative infinity. Oops, I can do a side by side here. If they both remain silent, they each get a year in prison. If Clyde remains silent and Bonnie confesses, well, he gets 20. But Bonnie, right, she doesn't make it, she gets negative infinity. If Clyde confesses but Bonnie remains silent, well, Clyde, he gets negative infinity, and Bonnie gets 20. So think about how the Nash equilibrium changes now with this credible threat. Because suppose you're Clyde, and you think Bonnie's going to confess. You're like, well, that's not so good for her, she's done. What should I do? Well, if I confess too, I'm done. If I remain silent, I get 20 years. Well, 20 years beats dying, I suppose. So, I'll remain silent. What if you're Clyde and you think Bonnie's remaining silent? You're like, well, I can confess, so give me. Or, I can remain silent and I'll get a year. Well, that's a no-brainer. So all of a sudden, with this credible threat, we can say remaining silent is the dominant strategy for Clyde. Let's spell Clyde wrong. That's great. C-L-Y-D-E. So what if you're Bonnie? If you're Bonnie, and you think Clyde's confessing, your choice is confess too, get taken out, or remain silent, get 20 years. Well, 20 years beats being taken out, so I'll remain silent. If you're Bonnie and you think Clyde is remaining silent, the choice is confess, get taken out, or remain silent, get a year. Well, now we give you a year of each remaining silent. So all of a sudden, remaining silent is the dominant strategy for Clyde and Bonnie. Yep. Sure. So right, the Nash equilibrium now becomes right there. So the Nash equilibrium now becomes optimal, at least from the standpoint of the players. So that's what a credible threat does. It makes playing the optimal strategy from the standpoint of the group, the dominant strategy for both players. Let's have a quick picture of this. You can see what happens, right? If the strategy is, or if the threat is not super credible, right, the negative infinity kind of goes away. That turns into a 5 again. The negative infinity here turns into a 0. Negative infinity here turns into a 0. So a non-credible threat is a threat that neither player takes seriously. And then all of a sudden we're back to the original Nash equilibrium with the original person still on. Any questions about that? So this is a video I want to show. I've never tried to show a video in this class, so I'm not sure if this will go smoothly or not. But there's a British game show. I don't know if it's still a game show or not, but the game show is called, or it is called, it's still on TV, Golden Balls. So it's like about a 3.5 posted it on Canvas just before class. But as you can see, the setup of golden balls is just a Bristol somehow. Is there are 2 contestants in golden balls? Just like there are 2 players in the Prisoner's Dilemma. And the whole point of the game show is, as we will see, can the players figure out a way to make the Nash equilibrium optimal? Let me try to pull this up on the computer real quickly. So what I think I will do is minimize notes. I downloaded it. All right, we'll just take it. Oops. We'll just take a second.
Carol, look at you.
Oh, yeah.
I love this Christmas tree. That was made.
Why is it so short?
It's cute, but it's kind of like depressing.
I mean, it's not, it's one. Yes, it's right.
And then she's like, I was like, can you help me decorate your tree? And she goes, no. She goes, I'm just gonna help you do it. I said, oh, okay.
Yeah, she said that like she never decorated a tree before.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sad.
I even I built the tree, but then she was.
She doesn't have lights either, she also said that.
Okay, so here we go. This is the game show. So, yeah, it's a pretty brutal game show. So, a student in one of my previous ECN 202 classes sent me this clip. It was on YouTube, so I never downloaded it, and then YouTube took it down for some reason. So I had to find it on some dude's Facebook, and I had to look at how to download a video from a Facebook. So that's why the video quality could be better. That's why it's brutal. So I'll show it in 2 parts. First, here's the setup of the game. Then we can think about how this is the Prisoner's Dilemma, and then we can think about what the optimal versus Nash equilibrium will be, and then we can see what actually happens. So let me see if the sound is too low. Let me know. I'm trying to get it louder. Can you guys hear it okay?
I think you can turn it up.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Oh, probably right. Okay,
Yeah,
great. All right. I'll start it over here.
This is serious life-changing money. Your jackpot today is 100,000, 150,000. One final decision to make. We're now going to split or steal. I know you're the last 2 people in the country I have to explain this to. But you have 2 final golden balls. You each have a golden ball with the word split written inside. You each have a golden ball with the word steal written inside. You will make a conscious choice of choosing the split or the steal ball. If you both choose the split ball, you split today's jackpot of 100,000, 150 pounds, and then go home 50,000 and 75 pounds. If one of you splits and one of you steals, whoever chooses the steal ball, 100,000, 150 pounds. The split ball goes home, nothing. If you both choose the steal ball, you go home with nothing.
Okay.
Before I ask you to choose,
Okay, so you guys understand the rules?
Uh-huh.
So each player has a ball. If they both pick split, they split 100,000 pounds, which is about $200,000 in American dollars, roughly. So if one person takes split and the other person picks steal, the person who picks steal gets the full pot. But if they both pick steal, they both get 0. So we can write out the payoff matrix real quick.
Oh.
I always forget to write some of my stinking markers. I need to have like an assistant with just like a candy, with like markers, phone, clicker, so when I set stuff down.
I know Ella's a pretty good assistant.
Yes.
Okay, so here is our payoff matrix. So we'll just call the first player, player 1 versus player 2. So the choice is, right, steal, split, steal, split. Okay, so we just established that if both play steal, each get zero. So I'll even use the symbol for a pound. L with a line through it. If they each get split, they each will just round it to 50,000 pounds. If he plays split, she plays steal, or if she plays split, he plays steal, whoever you want, they player 1, player 2, the player who plays split, well, he gets nothing. Whereas 100,000, right? Did I do that backwards? Yeah, no, I did that right. So, yeah, if she plays split, he plays steal. I don't know why I got backward there for a second. Well, he plays steal, he gets 100,000. He plays split, gets nothing. So that's the payoff matrix. So now let's think about, hey, what's the dominant strategy? Suppose you're player 1, and you think player 2 is going to play steal.
Ooh.
So what would you do if you're player 1 and you think the other person's going to steal? You're going to get 0 either way. The choice is, do you let the other player get 100,000, or do you force the other player to get 0 too? No, I would just say, you take the other person down with you, right? If you're going down, you might as well take the other person down with you.
Maybe then they know what you did and they'll give you like 10,000 pounds.
Maybe, well, there's no reason for that person to do so, though.
Right, maybe, yeah. I was thinking that makes what they stole it, so.
So what's the consensus, though? If you think the other person's going to steal, do you like screw the other person and take the 0?
Right.
That's
Because
it.
then it puts you at 100 in case
So, right, so let's just assume that if you think they're going to steal, you're going to steal too. Because you're both, of course, the other person gets 0. So suppose you think the other player is playing split, what should you do? Well, here's the question, right? Because if the other player is playing split and you steal, you get 100,000 pounds, whereas if you split 2, you get 50,000. If you just care about money, you're going to steal, right? Player 2, right? Suppose you're player 2 and you think player 1's going to steal. Your choice is, well, you're getting 0. Yeah, so if you think the other player is going to steal and you're player 2, well, you should probably steal too. You're getting 0 either way, might as well force the other guy to get 0 too. However, if you're player 2 and you think player 1's going to split, what should you do? Well, if you steal, you get 100,000. If you split, you get 50,000. You just care about money.
So it's better to steal. Interesting.
So, right, we can say for the golden ball, right, steal is the dominant strategy, right?
Right, let's talk about that.
So now we see the problem, right? The Nash equilibrium is each gets nothing. That's a problem. That's certainly suboptimal, right? The optimal would be right, the optimal would be each person just splits and gets 50,000 pounds. The problem should be pretty obvious. I'll get this over here. The problem, how to ensure the other player doesn't.
That's the problem. Because if you know they're going to split, then you're
Right, how to ensure the other player doesn't steal if you say split. Because you're going to play this simultaneously, as you see. You both open your balls simultaneously. You can't look at what one guy does and then make your decision based on that. So you know, right, if you play split, this guy's got a 50,000 pound incentive to just play steal and give you nothing. So you need some credible threat to ensure that if he steals when you split, the cost to him for stealing is gonna outweigh that 50,000 pound advantage. So, I killed the guy, it's on TV. So if the guy shows, go after him. So what would you guys do to try to convince the other player to play steal, or play split? You can offer, the problem is that's not super credible, right? Because you can say, hey, I'll give you 10,000 pounds if you don't steal.
And then you can steal it.
Yeah, you just steal it, right?
What if you say, I'm gonna steal it, either way, and I'll give you 40K, if you decide to let me steal it?
Oh.
Yeah, that's a good one, although how would
Today is the steal. But I guess you're right, because either way, if you steal, you get money. You get money, and they're gonna get zero either way, right?
Yeah, so if you, just suppose you, so I think what you're saying is, hey, I'm gonna play steal, you tell the other guy I'm gonna play steal.
Yeah.
If you play split, I'll take the full 100,000, but I'll give you 40.
Right, because either way, they're gonna get zero if I'm stealing.
Right, but how is it, you have to be able to.
It's not credible.
It's not credible, that's the problem, because you just walk away,
But
or
they also would only have your word, because
But either
They told you
way,
to steal, they told you to steal.
yeah, that's what you're thinking, you just say I'm gonna steal, but I will give you 40K.
they know you're gonna steal otherwise, so why would you lie about stealing?
or you say, I'm gonna split. Oh, but no, because you're gonna steal.
Why would you lie about stealing?
Person's gonna steal them.
Right.
Yeah, one thing I think along the lines of you is, that doesn't work either, I think suppose you get Venmo. You would say, I'm gonna Venmo you 40K right now.
What?
And then, yeah, so that would have worked, so that would be credible to like give the person.
But that's-
Okay, but hear me, think about this, like, if you say, I'm gonna steal it, you never split it with them, so they know you're going to 100K. Their only hope is if you decide to give them some.
But if you Venmo them that before, and then they just steal
Yeah, I
it
know,
out.
Because that's the only way.
You're asking, that's
No, I like the way you're thinking, you say, well, I'm a dirtbag, I'm gonna steal. So your only hope is to play split, trust I'm gonna give you 40K. I like that, I think
Yeah,
that's not bad.
because either way, they're getting zero, no.
Yeah, so, right, either way, they're getting zero, but you're just offering them some hope.
You're just being dirty.
Yeah, you can't come right off the front and say, I'm a dirtbag.
It's like, I
But
like
given
that.
that I'm a dirtbag, here's your best strategy. No, I like that, I think that's good. I'm recommend trying that. The one thing I thought about you was, you could maybe bluff the guy from the lawsuit to say something like, I promise to play split. Do you promise to play split too? Of course they're gonna say yes, right? You say, well, this constitutes a verbal contract. You said split, I say split.
Ah.
If you break that verbal contract, I talked to a friend of mine who's an attorney, I will immediately file a civil lawsuit for you breaking this verbal contract. Maybe I lose, maybe it doesn't go anywhere, but I guarantee it will cost you more than 50,000 pounds to fight the civil lawsuit.
Ah.
So you try to bluff a lawsuit?
That's such a bull.
So what happens?
Don't you think that would scare you at first when you did that?
Okay, if you're
You don't think-
I
you don't think, I think the
think
girl
the
might
girl's
scare
gonna
you.
steal, I think he's gonna steal. What do you think?
Okay, so
Someone steals, yeah.
we've got our dominant strategies. I like your idea. I would bluff the lawsuit. Maybe someone's gonna freaking kill someone like out on TV. I don't care.
Oh,
Let's see what happens. If they took our advice or not.
So to look at your two golden balls and make sure you know which is the split ball and which is the steal one. This is very important. Make sure you don't show it up. Before I ask you to choose,
do they know each other?
council talking to each other.
Stephen, I just talked with him without tears, and they were real tears, they were genuinely going to split them.
I won't split this. That's 50,000. I'm something.
Oh, I really don't know.
Very, very happy to go with 50,000. If I saw every single person there was not me.
There's no way I mean, everyone who knew me would just discuss it if I started.
When people watch this, they're not going to believe it.
Please.
I can look you in the I can look you straight in the eye and tell you.
Uh-oh, I'm nervous.
I swear down to you.
Somebody steals, look at his face.
That's such a brutal one, absolutely.
She's
easy to manipulate.
It is.
I would have stolen.
Do you think he's gonna steal? I think he's gonna
Choose
steal.
either the split or the steel ball now. Hold it up. We'll go with 50 on each.
Oh, no, he does look like he's lying.
He does this to it.
Split or scale? You never know what's coming in this game.
Oh, he's like,
Sarah, you have just won 100.
Look at her, she's like,
This will be golden balls until next time.
no, she's definitely smiling over that.
So there you go. He was not able to credibly threaten, so he got shafted.
I think I would probably play steel. Yeah.
You're right, you'll national organization just go down in flames.
But that's the problem. But it's like, I don't know. Right, the game.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
That broke my heart.
Okay, so that's a pretty tough game show, man.
What would you do? You would steal. That's steal. You would steal, 100%.
It'd be a game time decision, as they say.
Now, I think because you wouldn't have this chart in your head, and stealing is not.
I think I would try to talk about the stupid threats and see if I can get a sense if it's credible or not. I like yours. Just come right out and say the scumbag, so you should just.
Yeah, because I don't really, I think I would have to go Dairy Queen too. Yeah. Because I think coming on, I'm gonna split it, it's like, that's, everybody does that.
Yeah, it sounds great. That's a good one. To talk about how you're going to lose your house, you need £50,000 to pay off the day. So my parents would get thrown out on the street, my parents had no problems.
I think I'd start crying. Oh, yeah.
Do you trust humanity now?
She did.
What's that?
Do you trust humanity now?
Trust you?
Humanity now?
Yeah, that's a problem, right?
100,000.
I thought she was so innocent and she was like high school.
When I felt it, I was like,
She was like almost crying too when she cried. She was doing it the whole time. I was like, who was this?
Yeah, you try to size up the other person and like think of what friend has the best chances of working and run with it. So, I forget how far I go with these notes. 15 minutes left. I think we should probably finish these notes. Another example of the Christmas dilemma is advertising. We think about the economics of advertising. Why does the firm advertise? Well, because it wants the demand curve for its product to the right. We talk about how advertising and supply and demand might change taste of preferences for people towards the good, so they prefer the good more than before. So what does that mean? Well, first, it might be that you consumers learn about the product and just start buying it. So advertising introduces people to a new product, hence they begin purchasing it. That's called startup consumption. Has there ever been a product you've never heard of until you saw an ad and you're okay, it sounds like a great idea, so I will buy it.
I can't think of it, but probably.
Well, these pants, they're from Barbell Apparel. I learned about them on Shark Tank. I bought their jeans, and their jeans were really comfortable, so I bought their dress pants because they're stretchy. That's why I like them. So that's startup consumption. I had no idea who Barbell Apparel was until they advertised. But that's the only example I can think of, and no one else has any examples. So probably the other motivation for advertising, why the demand curve for particular products will shift to the right, is that people consuming a previous brand to consuming a new brand. So that's called brand switching. So perhaps you see an advertisement for Pepsi with Britney Spears, and you're a Coke drinker, and you're like, well, Britney's drinking Pepsi, so I want to drink Pepsi too. So you stop drinking Pepsi, or stop drinking Coke and start drinking Pepsi. Another example might be like trucks. You know, if you see a truck ad, it's like, you know what a big truck is. They see like a really cool ad for like a Ford F-150, you're like, well, I'm not a Chevy guy any longer, I'm a Ford guy. This was like many years ago, probably 10 years ago, I was at a golf outing, The way golf probably works is you get paired with a group of 4 people, and you play basketball. I'm usually against golf outings, and I'm like a crazy loner, but every once in a while I'll play one for charity. And this guy was drinking Miller Lights playing golf, and I don't like to drink beer when I play golf, because this guy was talking Miller Lights, and he told me, he's like, the reason why I drink Miller Light is because I saw an ad where the tagline was, it's raining beer. The implication of the ad was Bud Light is basically water. Hence, when you're drinking Bud Light, it's raining beer, you switch to Miller Light, which has a better beer taste, allegedly. So I'm like, hey, that's brand switching. That's a great example of brand switching. He saw the ad, and he switched brands. The demand curve for Miller Light shifted to the right, the demand curve for Bud Light shifted to the left. So, we think about beer advertising and cigarette advertising. Those are examples of brand switching. Because think about cigarettes. You can't really advertise cigarettes anymore, but I was younger, though you could. It's not like no one's ever heard of a cigarette, right? So what cigarette companies would advertise, what they're trying to do is steal another cigarette company's smokers. So, as an example of advertising, let's suppose the cigarette market's a $40 million market. Maybe there's maybe 40 million of profits to be had selling cigarettes, which is a way understatement, but it's just a nice round number. And let's suppose there are 2 tobacco companies, tobacco company A and B. So that's not too far from reality, right? Since cigarettes are a classic case of oligopoly, where the four-firm concentration ratio is over 90%. Okay, let's just assume it's a duopoly, just to make things simple. So let's suppose that all else equal, these cigarette companies are selling the same product, so they're just going to split the market. Which means, right, if neither company does anything, they each get half of the profits in the market, 20 million each. However, if one advertises and the other doesn't, the one who advertises will steal $15 million of the other company's profits, just by stealing its consumers. Maybe your ad will be like it's raining tobacco, I don't know. And as a result, you'll steal the other company's smokers. So that means is the advertising company will get its profits plus 15 million from the other company, but you have to pay 10 million to run the ads. Which means you get 20 plus 15, 35 minus 10, which is 25. So if tobacco company B advertises and tobacco company A doesn't, tobacco company B gets 25, whereas tobacco company A gets 5. Whereas if tobacco company B doesn't advertise, but tobacco company A does, now B gets 5 and A gets 25. If both advertise, well, what they do is if they both advertise, they both get 20, they split the market, but they're both paying for ads, which costs 10, so they're left over with 10. So 10, 10. So, okay, suppose you are the CEO of tobacco company B, we could say, we'll just write that being called B, we could say, well, that's player 1. That's player 2. So if you're the CEO of tobacco company B, your choice is advertise versus not advertise. Well, your choice depends on what you think your opponent's going to do. So if you think the other company is advertising, what should you do? If you advertise, you get 10. If you don't advertise, you get 5. Well, if this guy's advertising, clearly you should do. Suppose you're a tobacco company B and you think the other guy's not advertising. Your choice is don't advertise either, get 20, or advertise, steal his customers, and get 25. Well, you should advertise and steal his customers. So we could say advertising is the dominant strategy for B, and we will see for A. Because if you're the CEO for company A, and you think B is going to advertise, your choice is advertise 2, get 10, or don't, get 5. Well, you should advertise. If you're the CEO of company A, and you think B is not going to advertise, what should you do? Well, if you advertise, you get 25, versus don't, you get 20, so you will advertise. So the dominant strategy for both companies is to advertise. Hence, the Nash equilibrium is, well, both firms advertise.
that is suboptimal from the standpoint of these two companies because profits would be higher if neither advertised. Because if neither advertised, they would still split the market just like they do if they both advertise. But if neither advertises, they save on not having to run ads. So the profits are 20 rather than 10. However, just like the prisoner's dilemma, right? Suppose one company doesn't advertise, the other company will immediately start advertising to steal business. So you need some sort of, I should say, credible threat. You need some sort of credible threat to prevent this from happening. Credible threat says, I have to ensure that if I advertise, my competitor also won't advertise. So that if I don't advertise, he doesn't immediately start running ads and steal my customers. So again, what would the credible threat be? I don't know, you just probably can't call up the guy trying to kill him. That probably wouldn't work, just like it wouldn't work by golden balls. So the box solution probably doesn't work. You can't like sign a contract with the other guy that says, hey, I pledge not to advertise, hey, sign this contract, you pledge not to advertise, and if you break the contract and sue you, that wouldn't work. Because that's price fixing, right? That's illegal. You try to do that, you would find yourself being charged with a felony for violating the U.S. antitrust law. So just signing a contract doesn't work for these solutions. Because if the other guy breaks the contract, you sue him, the judge is going to go, no, please tell me about this contract you signed with your competitor that says that you're not going to compete. So the credible threat that emerged, oops, shoot, I was going to take a picture of this. So the credible threat that emerged was that the government made it illegal to advertise cigarettes. You cannot run ads for cigarettes any longer. You can't run print ads, can't run radio ads, you can't have TV ads. Cigarette companies can't sponsor sporting events. I remember going to Tigers games in the 1980s, and there would be cigarette advertisements like in Tiger Stadium on the outfield wall. The championship cup for NASCAR used to be called the Winston Cup because the Winston Tobacco Company used to sponsor it. Can't do that any longer. So it's Winston now, the Sprint Cup. Yes, a phone company advertiser sponsors it now. Because what happened was, in the 1990s, various state governments sued tobacco companies to try to recoup the losses those state governments suffered by having to pay for smoking-related illnesses. Because there's something called Medicaid. Medicaid is a state program that covers health expenditures for people who are low income. So you have low income people smoking, they get smoking-related illnesses. State Medicaid bills go up as a result, so the state governments decided to sue the tobacco companies and try to get that money back. So that lawsuit was settled by something called the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement, where the tobacco companies agreed to pay the 50 states $200 billion in total to drop the lawsuit. So all 50 states split about $200 billion in the 1990s. Michigan got somewhere on the order of $20 billion for the tobacco companies. That money's been long spent. Michigan did not use the money to treat smoking-related illnesses. They used it for college scholarships. So that money's been gone, so sorry, you don't get any tobacco money to go to college. But that's kind of like one of the ironies of this lawsuit is like states get billions of dollars and they kind of use it for everything but treating smoking-related illnesses. Well, as part of the settlement, it became illegal to advertise cigarettes. Well, this did the cigarette companies a huge favor because it enforces the no advertising outcome as the equilibrium outcome. Right now, no tobacco company can advertise. Because if we think about what would happen if a tobacco company advertised right now with the advertising ban, well, we would assume that if a cigarette company advertised, it would get negative infinity in benefits. Negative infinite benefits. Because what would happen is the Department of Justice would sue that tobacco company, and they would face legal consequences. So if you're the CEO of tobacco company B, all of a sudden, if you advertise, you get negative infinity. You get sued by the Department of Justice. Same if you're tobacco company A. If you're tobacco company B and you don't advertise, and tobacco company A does, well, sure, you get 5. He gets negative infinity, which you would say, well, that probably would force him out of business. So in the long run, you probably get the full market, which is even better. Whereas if tobacco company B advertises and tobacco company A doesn't, well then B gets negative infinity because he gets sued by the Department of Justice, whereas A, he gets his 5, but in the long run probably gets the full market if he goes out of business. And then if neither advertises, each gets 20. So what's the new Nash equilibrium? Well, if you're the CEO of tobacco company B, your choice is, hey, you think A is doing something crazy, he's advertising. Your choice is to advertise 2, go down with him and get sued, or don't advertise and get 5. Well, 5 sounds a lot better to me. If you're the CEO of company A is not advertising, your choice is start advertising, go down and get sued, or don't advertise and get 20. Well, that's a no-brainer. If you're the CEO of company A and you think B is advertising, what should you do? Well, if you advertise 2, you get minus infinity. That's not good. If you choose not to advertise, well, you get 5. That's better. Whereas if you're the CEO of company A and you think B is not advertising, your choice is start advertising, go down, get sued, or don't advertise and get 20. Well, that's a no-brainer too. So that advertising ban turns not advertising into each company's dominant strategy. Hence, the Nash equilibrium that emerges becomes optimal from the standpoint of both companies. So that's a pretty credible threat, right? That if you fight the advertising ban, you get sued. So sure, the no advertising ban helps ensure that neither cigarette company advertises and thus increases its profits, and also it keeps new competitors out. Because suppose you want to start a new tobacco company for some reason, how are you going to ever tell smokers about your product if advertising your product is illegal? You can't get new smokers to switch brands any longer. So not only does not advertising inflate the existing company's profits, but that they will be the oligopolist in the market basically forever, because now it's basically impossible for a new company to enter. And that's why these cigarette companies probably agreed to that master settlement agreement in the first place. That $20 billion bought them a protected market forever.
It's 20, right?
What's that?
20, right?
No. So the settlement agreement in the 90s was $200 billion.
That is so much.
Yeah, $200 billion is split 50 ways. So yeah, Michigan got one. But the $20 billion, that's just how much Michigan got. Yeah, but the other 4 United States got to up to $200 billion. Wow. But the cigarette companies probably made it back in the form of now they don't have to advertise any longer, so that goes right back into their profits. It keeps new competitors out, which allows them to raise their prices. That's why it costs $10 a pack of cigarettes, whereas before this probably costs $1 or $2 per pack. Some cigarettes are still legal, they're just a lot more expensive than before. So lowering the people who smoke are paying the higher price and just gets funneled into the tobacco company's profit. That's how lawsuits work, right? The people who get sued, they make up like bandits, and who gets shafted? Well, the consumer. At least in this lawsuit. But you shouldn't smoke, kids. That's bad for you. Or vape. So we're out of time. So we're almost done with this set of lecture notes. We'll talk about what an arms race is, then we will switch gears to lecture number 15. So one last thing to talk about this week is the switch gears to lecture 15, and if we go virtual, I will just post a Zoom link on Canvas, and I will conduct class from home on Zoom.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Happy to get everyone.
You too.
That'll be good. Well, hopefully.
Yes. Have a good day.
Okay. So the Zooms or the YouTube seem to work out pretty well.
Good.
I've lost a little bit.
Yeah, it's 4 fingers, swipe.
Oh, okay.
So I've got 2 different windows open, and whoops. It's right there. And string, and boom.
Okay.
Actually, you're right.